Hello and good evening, dear colleagues. I understand that one part of our attendees are in the coffee break because behind the scenes in coffee and tea breaks are also an important place for networking, exchanging opinions, creating new ideas, and even projects. So we will be lenient towards those who are still absent here, but we will be happy when they join us here. So we will begin now. Actually, the last session of this conference, which will be about the future steps of the international community in providing safety and restoring the basic rights of people who survived sexual violence during war. We have stressed many times how important it is to cooperate, governments and international organizations, international partners, and nobody is doubtful about the importance of it. So this session is not about why this cooperation is important, but it is about what specific steps are there going to be in this cooperation, which is a very important prerequisite and a precondition for successful shaping and implementing the necessary policies that are intended to deal with the CRSV. Unfortunately, Irina Mudra, Deputy Minister of Justice, will not be able to be here. She's been doing quite a lot on international level to advocate this cause. She's basically managing the work on international register of damages done by Russian aggression against Ukraine. But this international register was created during the Summit of Heads of States and Governments of the Council of Europe, which happened in Reykjavik May last year. Council of Europe plays a very important role in assisting Ukraine in countering Russian aggression and in creating different instruments and tools to help Ukraine withstand this aggression and provide and guarantee the rights of the survivors. So Madam Lukyanchenko, who is the head of the Office of Council of Europe in Ukraine, you represent an organization which indeed is doing quite a lot on helping achieve justice. And we mentioned justice pretty often today, and specifically justice towards survivors, and survivors were mentioning it themselves. Could you please outline the main areas of work for Council of Europe in responding to sexual violence related to conflict, and specifically in the context of the future, what are the next steps you're planning to do? Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear Kateryna, dear members of the panel, moderators and participants. To begin, I would like to state that I am really grateful that the Council of Europe can be represented here at this great conference. I arrived a little bit early before this panel, and I already heard some great feedback about the participation, about the results, and about what an added value it brings to Ukraine and how important it is. So allow me to thank all the organizers for putting together such a topical event at a time where the problem of conflict-related sexual violence has unfortunately become so relevant in Ukraine due to the armed aggression of the Russian Federation, which has been ongoing for already more than 2 years. And on behalf of the Council of Europe office, I would like to state that we really have no words to express our admiration for the resilience and the strength of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian authorities in the face of the atrocities and violence unseen basically since the end of World War II. So we stand with you, and we will continue to do so here in Ukraine. Kateryna pointed out about the role of the Council of Europe in dealing with conflict-related sexual crimes. I know already in the first session, the First Lady made a reference to the Register of Damages. So I will speak a little bit about this and some other activities that the Council of Europe is doing in this regard. Some of you may rightly wonder, how does the Council of Europe support Ukraine in such difficult times, and how does it try to address the question of CRSV? These are very valid questions, which I will try to answer in the next few minutes. I will also try to address the issue of international accountability of Russia in the context of the Council of Europe Register of Damages. Allow me to start by reminding us all that 1 month after the start of the full-scale aggression in March 22, the Council of Europe has expelled the aggressor state. We were the first international organization to do so, and one of the very few to do so to date. Later, the Action Plan for Ukraine, Resilience, Recovery, Reconstruction for the period 23-26 has been developed in very close cooperation with the Ukrainian authorities to provide the framework for an enhanced cooperation in response to the new and dramatic situation. You should know this is the largest plan in the history of the Council of Europe ever tailored for a single country. So I am very proud to be at the head of an office that is currently running 27 projects in Ukraine, and more are coming in the next months. Dear colleagues, the Russian full-scale aggression and the need to support Ukraine was the primary reason for the call for a Council of Europe summit in May last year, which Kateryna already made a reference to. This summit took place in May last year in Reykjavik, and it was only the 4th summit in the organization's history. 75 years, by the way, we are celebrating this year of the Council of Europe. The summit had several important outcomes, but let me focus on the issue of accountability of the crimes committed by Russia and the establishment of the Register of Damages. And I will start this section by making a brief quotation from the declaration of the summit, which stated, "We stress the universal principle that no statutes of limitation apply to genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, including conflict-related sexual violence. Only by respecting the right to truth, to justice, to reparation, and to guarantees of non-repetition will it be possible to overcome the past and create solid foundations to build unity in the spirit of harmony and cooperation with respect for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. To this end, member states of the Council of Europe have established the Register of Damages. As you could note, it is a very clear and strong message by heads of states and governments, and followed by concrete action. It also needs to be stressed that the establishment of the Register of Damages under the Council of Europe is only the first component. The first component of a future international comprehensive compensation mechanism, which needs yet to be established. The register shall serve as a record in documentary form or of evidence and claims on damage, loss, or injury caused to all natural and legal persons concerned, as well as the state of Ukraine and authorities and state-owned and controlled entities. It is important to highlight the role of the Register of Damage in holding the aggressor state accountable for any wrongful acts, including conflict-related sexual violence. The rules and regulations governing the work of the register, including the determination of categories of claims, the procedures for receiving the claims, processing and recording them, will be proposed by the board of the register and then shall be approved by the conference of all member states who joined it. There can be no doubt, however, already at this stage that claims related to sexual violence will be included in the list of categories for future examination and evaluation. And why I say this? Because in the statement of December last year, the Register of Damages Board highlighted already the need for a category of damage on loss of life, torture, and sexual violence, as well as personal injury. What's important in the work of the register is the participation of victims and survivors, as it is essential to legitimacy and success of any reparation program. It promotes empowerment, understanding, accountability, as well as healing and recovery. The register will allow victims and survivors of the war to directly participate in the reparation process. The need to receive millions of claims, and this is a more technical but also important issue, requires the register to rely on modern technology and receive all claims and information in digital form. The means of submissions of claims, Ukraine's DIA application, is familiar and accessible to most of the victims. The interface shall be easy to navigate and aim to minimize the time and effort required to fill out the claims forms. It shall aim to simplify the learning process for new users, be as intuitive as possible, with clear instructions and helping guidelines. Claimants who are not well versed in modern technology will receive the required assistance. So, as you probably will know, the main seat of the Register of Damages is or will be very soon operational in The Hague, but we are also envisaging in the near future, we are really hopeful that it will be this spring to open a satellite antenna office in Kyiv. In September of last year, at the meeting of Council of Europe Ministers of Justice, which was held in Riga, the Riga principles were adopted. Maybe it was already mentioned during today's conference in the context of the victim-centered approach. And this is one of the priorities also for the Register of Damages. It will work on the basis of a victim-centered approach and prioritize claims for human rights violations and abuses, such as those involving conflict-related sexual violence. It is very encouraging, and I'm saying it from my own personal experience, that the Ukrainian authorities are taking victim-centered approach very much to heart and implement it in practice. Through inter alia, the newly established Prosecutor General Coordination Center for Victims and Witnesses of War Crimes, which I have visited already twice and with which we cooperate very closely. The center plays a crucial role in providing support and assistance to victims and witnesses of war crimes, ensuring that their voices are heard and their rights are protected. It is crucial to enhance the work and capacity of the center to further increase its effectiveness and reach. It is equally important to coordinate all relevant national initiatives in this domain to ensure a comprehensive approach to the needs of the victims and witnesses of war crimes. But this is also, I understand, one of the roles of this conference. I would like to seize this opportunity to briefly mention the recently prepared Council of Europe report on remedies and redress mechanisms for the war-affected individuals in Ukraine. Is my time nearly over? Can I have 2 more minutes? And I will wrap up. So the report, which underscores the urgent need for effective remedies and redress mechanisms to address human rights violations and sufferings endured by individuals as a result of the war in Ukraine. It particularly focuses on most vulnerable victims, including those who have endured conflict-related sexual violence. Dear friends, as I said, we are currently conducting over 27 projects in Ukraine including a project on the Council of Europe violence against women, and an important element which needs to be highlighted in this context was the fact that Ukraine became a state party to the Istanbul Convention in July of 22, already when the full-scale aggression was ongoing. So this is really a commendable achievement, and it gives us a solid basis to work on with our Ukrainian partners. And maybe I would just like to say that I would like to announce that the topic of conflict-related sexual violence will be the subject of work of a newly started Council of Europe project on the rights of veterans and personnel of armed forces. The project has been launched just a few days ago on the 1st of March. And as you know, over the past 2 years, the Ukrainian army has experienced a substantial growth, tripling in size, with a notable increase in female enlistment. So we will address also the challenges related to this new phenomenon. And to finish, dear colleagues, I would like to say that the international community needs to enhance its cooperation even further to effectively address the issues of accountability of Russian crimes committed during the war against Ukraine. The Council of Europe is doing its part and is ready to do even more to make this process effective. We need to treat the effective realization of rights of victims as a priority, which will impact the credibility of our actions now and in the future. Thank you very much, and sorry for going a little bit over my time.
Чи чути мене?
Thank you very much, Mr. Matei. Thank you sincerely for your statement, for giving us certain updates, especially about the new project that started a few days ago and that will focus on helping veterans. That is indeed very valuable and necessary in the context that we have as of today. My next question will be to Mr. Massimo. As representative of an organization which, with no exaggeration, was the main powerful partner, and you remain the partner, and providing and expanding holistic aid to the state in cases of CRSV and prevention of CRSV cases, I would like to ask you, what does Ukraine need to focus on in the future and the nearest future? And not only Ukraine, but also partners who currently are asking us, like, what should we change in program parts, in different strategic parts? So your experience would be really valuable for us, and that would be also a very important message for our partners. Thank you.
For having us here, for having me here to help you, Kateryna. I switched the long speech with a long one, with a short one, sorry. So I'll just try to help you compensate your task of moderating. But rather than focusing on what we do as an agency, I'd like us to go back to the very point that this is about the survivors. It's about their rights, about their circumstances, about their challenges. What has really moved me today is a conversation and hearing all the courage of the people that were also able to come forward and highlighting not only the extent of the challenges that we are confronted with, but also the resilience and the strength of the survivors who are at the core of the issue that we're discussing today. I cannot go further without thanking and honoring the leadership of the government of Ukraine, who has taken a very serious approach to the matter, as has been also evidenced this morning by the panel and the speakers. This demonstrates a commitment on tackling CRSV, but GBV more broadly. It is also important to demonstrate a proactive approach to coordination, as also you're indicating, in order to ensure that we are all working with the rights and the needs of the survivors at the center of anything that we do. Without this level of coordination and managing such a vast, complex challenge, we will not be able to move the agenda forward. The stories of survivors are all unique and very personal. There's not one story that captures them all. Each individual have their own very meaningful story for themselves. And we need to make sure that this also is reflected in how we respond. We cannot have a one response for everybody. The response needs to be tailored to this, tailored to and respectful to the needs of the survivors. We need to recognize that this approach requires a long-term, very multifaceted, very complex type of strategies to honor the individual journeys towards recovery and justice. I want to underline recovery and justice. It's not only about justice. We need to remember that their narratives are rich in pain, but also they sketch the path forward for us. In addressing CRSV, we benefit from the collaboration across the UN agencies. As you heard earlier this morning, Madame Pramila Patton, as well as the resident coordinator, Denise Brown, highlighted the fact that there's a number of UN agencies that are working together. As a UN, we bring a diversity of capacities and expertise, and we want to put this expertise at the service of the survivors. This also enables us to provide a nuanced approach, because different agencies can cater for different dimensions of the needs of survivors. The survivors, however, need to remain at the very center of anything that we do. The road ahead is very long. I first got involved in this unfortunate subject matter over 30 years ago in the fall of Yugoslavia, when the concept of rape and war was actually codified as a formal war crime and violation of human rights. There will be many obstacles, there will be many challenges, there will be many pitfalls, there will be also some mistakes that we'll be making along the way. But by working together, we can, over the next few years, with a committed approach, ensure that we maintain this collective resolve for a future where dignity and rights are respected for all. I also want to use this opportunity, although they're not here, but maybe they will listen to some of this, to our donors. At the end of the day, all of these efforts come at a cost, and they cannot be borne exclusively by the government of Ukraine and the generosity of the civil society and the other important actors. The donors need to be able to trust the government's leadership, trust the government's coordination, and enable the network that you all represent in this room to be able to support this. I also want to, I'm an optimist by nature. I want to live today's not only with the grim reality of the context that we're facing, but with a reinvigoration of our hope. The hope that the courage of the survivors fuels us with, that gives us a clear future, and with our dedication, we can actually make sure that we will deliver on a world that is going to be free of sexual violence, that this heinous, the most heinous crime is actually eradicated from any action of mankind and humankind forever. So I really want to thank you all for the commitment. This is not an end of a journey. This journey will last for long. Let's make sure that we stay together, stay committed, and help one another, because the survivors just simply need from us nothing less than that. So thank you.
Дякую, пане Масімо.
Thank you very much, Mr. Massimo. Thank you for your last remark, that you focused that we have to be united, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and we have to be coordinated and united in our work. Thank you very much. Next question to Mr. Herman. Mr. Herman, you know that in the latest years, Ukraine is learning experience of many military conflicts, and in the latest 2 years, especially actively, we are studying that. Unfortunately, the situation today is that probably we already can share this experience with international partners, with other contexts. What would you advise us? How can we, our positive experience and maybe not really positive experience, how can we kind of disseminate that more, and how can we make it more popular? I mean, to speak about that among our partners, and to tell that to the countries who are in the condition of armed under the conditions of war, or who are combating.
Hello. Thank you, Yevgenia. First of all, let me thank you for inviting us here. It's great to see all partners gathered here. A lot from Ukraine, of course, and some international partners. So thank you. And that is an excellent question. And by the way, that is a big, important part of the rationale of our side event that we're conducting tomorrow afternoon. From young women's experience addressing CRSV in numerous countries with very diverging realities and contexts, including the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Colombia, Guatemala, countries of the Western Balkans, we recognize that there's a breadth of international experience and practice that Ukraine can look at, analyze, and adapt in its process of designing programs to address CRSV that reflect and respond to the realities of Ukraine. With the support of the international community, through UN Women, UNFPA, and several other United Nations entities, Ukraine has the opportunity to build on that knowledge and experience to develop Ukrainian solutions for Ukrainian realities. And likewise, as UN Women, having had the opportunity to work with the Ukrainian government when civil society organizations, particularly women-led organizations and survivors networks on gender-responsive CRSV prevention and response, it is evident that Ukraine is also developing a breadth, an important breadth of knowledge and experience and practice from which other countries can learn and benefit from when addressing CRSV in their own contexts. For one key lesson to be learned from Ukraine is the great importance of quick and coordinated, nationally led, multi-stakeholder action. In Ukraine, we are working to ensure the rights of CRSV survivors in real time, as these atrocious violations are happening, which makes a very big difference. As on this front, time is always of the essence. And this has been possible due to the swift action by Ukrainian government and civil society actors, particularly women-led organizations and survivors themselves, in the United Nations that led to the signature of the framework of cooperation between the government and the United Nations, which is the base of our joint efforts to build a coordinated system to address CRSV in response to the needs, perspectives, and expectations of survivors. Let me stress that it is in Ukraine that UN Women, UNFPA, UNDP, IOM, UNODC, and OHCHR are jointly implementing the largest ever project addressing CRSV under the umbrella of the UN Action Against Sexual Violence and Conflict. And it is in Ukraine that for the first time, with the support of the European Union, women protection advisors are being deployed to the United Nations country team under the leadership of the resident coordinator. What we do here in collaboration with government, with civil society organizations, with women-led organizations, with survivors themselves, will surely inform international practice. Also, from our perspective as UN Women, having had the opportunity to work closely and provide technical support and institutional support as well to women-led organizations and survivors networks. Another aspect of the Ukrainian experience that is and will be extremely valuable for the international community relates to the bravery and the resilience of civil society, as well as the impressive capacity of women-led organizations to quickly acquire the necessary knowledge and adapt its whole way of operating to respond to the needs of survivors in a rapidly changing and extremely challenging context. I am convinced that that experience of Ukrainian survivors and women-led organizations will inspire people in all corners of the world. Finally, as the co-chair of the reparations subgroup for the implementation of the framework of cooperation, I'd like to highlight something that's very interesting, and is that historically, reparation mechanisms have mostly been developed during the late stages or even at the end of conflicts. However, Ukraine's experience is unique in a number of ways, including in its swift acknowledgement of the importance of a restoration of survivors' rights in real time, which has so far led to the development of two complementary bills, as it has been mentioned before, on the registry, on the creation of a registry of damages and losses, and of the establishment of a reparations mechanism, and also the establishment of an urgent interim reparation pilot program to offer timely multi-sectoral support to survivors. I am confident that this exceptional early responsiveness, if it is coupled with strengthened efforts to carry these initiatives forward, in this context, Ukraine can and will be in a unique position to become a world reference for the early and development of survivor-centered, effective reparations mechanisms and systems to address CRSV holistically. And this, of course, aided by nationally adapted international practice. So let me reiterate that UN Women is committed to continue supporting Ukraine to strengthen its efforts jointly with other United Nations entities to address CRSV and restore the rights of survivors. And we're committed to accompanying Ukraine in what it can be the path to becoming a standard setter for the development and implementation of effective gender-responsive CRSV prevention and response systems, including CRSV, including survivor-centered reparations mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. And now I would like to ask the question, to give the floor to Deputy Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Ms. Victoria Litvinova. Victoria, like I said at the beginning of our session, do we pay too little attention to issues of justice, to the issue of bringing to justice the perpetrators of crimes and punishment in the very direct meaning of this word, as we understand the criminal code of Ukraine, as well as the symbolic meaning of this word, political persecution or other things like that. And of course, speaking together with international organizations and the international community, it's very important for us to understand how we build our cooperation with our colleagues from the international arena. The Office of the Prosecutor General was widely represented at the event today. It was also mentioned by multiple participants. And a lot of people pointed out your victim-centered approach, survivor-centered approach, and your interaction with international partners. So what prospects do you see here? Hello, dear colleagues. Thank you very much, Kateryna, for such feedback. I'm very happy that even at panels where I didn't personally participate, the work of my colleagues was assessed quite positively. I will start my presentation by answering your question directly of how we work with the ICC. I want to say that actually we have very effective cooperation, and after the beginning of the full-scale invasion back in March 2022, the ICC started an investigation, made an important decision to investigate the situation in Ukraine, and the relevant decision was announced on the 2nd of March by prosecutor of the ICC, Karim Khan. According to this decision, the ICC can prosecute war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes of genocide committed on the territory of Ukraine since 21st of November 2013 and until the present. The Prosecutor General's office works with the ICC on a daily basis, and one of the examples of effective cooperation is arrest orders for Putin and Ms. Lvova Belova for illegal deportation of Ukrainian children. And after a field office of the ICC was opened in Ukraine last year, this cooperation has only become stronger. ICC experts work day in, day out with our documents and on the ground, and we are constantly in dialogue. I'm very determined to see it through. I will explain that the Code of Criminal Procedure contains a certain condition where investigators and prosecutors of the ICC can carry out investigative action on our territory. There should be permission of the Prosecutor General here. So whenever there is a request for any investigative action, the Prosecutor General immediately responds and issues the permission on the very same day because we have nothing to hide. We want the ICC to be monitoring the present situation as closely as possible. I hope there will be more arrest orders under various charges of war crimes. Overall, the Russian aggression has multiple aspects. Of course, one of the most disgusting manifestations of this aggression is conflict-related sexual violence. As of today, prosecutors and investigators recorded 274 cases of CRSV, which includes 178 women, 97 men, and 13 minors. There are the following types of sexual violence: rape, crippling or torture of the genitals, forced nudity, threats and attempts at rape, and forcing into observing sexual violence against a loved one. The Prosecutor General's office has already announced its charges concerning 40 Russian military servants. Indictments are prepared concerning 15 individuals, and 2 have already received sentences of 12 and 10 years in prison. In the regional dimension, the greatest number of survivors was recorded in Kherson Oblast, about 80 people. In Donetsk Oblast, 73 people. Kyiv Oblast, 53 persons. Sexual violence was documented in all oblasts, which were temporarily occupied at any point. We are aware that the majority of individuals who went through CRSV do not report it and do not turn to law enforcement agencies. This is one of the most silenced crimes, not just in Ukraine, but across the world. That is why we decided to change our approach to help survivors as best we could, to encourage survivors into participating in a criminal process and to help them restore control over their life. In the last year alone, Prosecutor General approved the rules regarding the work with survivors of CRSV. And I heard the positive feedback about the Coordination Center of Victims and Witnesses, which is completely new indeed. Protecting the interests of survivors has been identified as a priority for prosecution agencies for 2023 to 2025. The new approaches in the work of survivors of sexual violence is based on the Murad Code. But like Mr. German pointed out, we adapted it to our national legislation. We adhere to the international protocol on documenting and investigating sex-related crimes in our work. We have three main concerns: safety, respect, assistance. The key thing at every stage of the process is that survivors should feel safe. All the procedures are adapted to their needs and individual characteristics. Survivors are clearly informed what is happening and how it is happening, and it is up to them when to move forward. All personal data are protected. Survivors have the right to full confidentiality. There is complete prohibition of any kind of stigma, and all possible resources are engaged for psychological, medical, legal, and other types of assistance to the survivors. I would like to thank our partners from NGOs who have been providing this assistance to us since the first day of the full-scale invasion, and even help us in the development of standards of work with survivors of CRSV. They also participate in the development of guidelines for prosecutors how to act. As the research of the Global Survivor Fund shows, CRSV survivors have a broad range of needs, starting from psychological and psychiatric aid, registration of documents, social guarantees for location, for employment, and even migration. There is a set of activities that are aimed to restore the social functions and the mental condition of the person in question. Such assistance should be accessible yet long-standing. One of the first steps on this path is to receive the victim status and to receive reparations, which is why the pilot project that we discussed today is so important. We are implementing this project together with our partners, and this initiative cannot be overestimated. I want to thank the government and the parliament for rapid development of this program and its regulatory base. And I would like to thank our international partners for their expert assistance in the development of this mechanism. And I'm thankful to a lot of people, especially you, Kateryna, for supporting us and for maintaining focus on this important subject. On behalf of Prosecutor General's Office, I want to assure you that we will only further strengthen the institutional capacity to effectively prosecute CRSV crimes, and we are also going to develop our cooperation with other stakeholders to help everyone who was affected by the actions of the aggressor. Thank you very much. Let's give Victoria some applause. Thank you, Victoria. You know having many years of experience in cooperation with law enforcement agencies, including prosecution, Prosecutor General's office, and so on, I should indeed point out the positive progress in the work and attitudes to survivors. And it is very important that those strategic documents that are passed on the level of the leadership are later implemented into practice. There is indeed support that is available here. So I hope that this assistance will remain on the same level as it was last year or the year before that. Currently, Yevhen, I would like to speak with you. Yevhen Cymbaluk, who is with us today, represents the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and he has a very new position, Ambassador for Special Assignments, issues of human rights, gender equality, and diversity. That was when the ministry created a council for gender equality and diversity. And these two events are very closely connected. And they definitely show that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has dedication to these issues. I have my personal experience working with Yevhen as an ambassador who represented Ukraine in OSCE, and I am a member of the Human Rights Council, and I really support its creation, so that's also another subject that we discussed a lot. Yevhen, I will not say more about the Human Rights Council. I would like you to make that comment and to, I guess, inform the participants of the conference how the newly created council can help with promoting the assistance to survivors with reparations, which is something that we started discussing today on the international level. What are the promising vectors of work that we see for ourselves in the sector? Because your position is unique in Ukraine, and undoubtedly there is a question about your vision of cooperation with various international organizations. Maybe it is slightly provocative, but what commitments should international partners undertake so that our work on ensuring justice and remedy for survivors would be effective?
Дякую дуже, дякую.
Thank you so much for the question. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to participate in this discussion. It's a great pleasure for me to be with you here today. And the Council of Human Rights has been working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs since December 2023. I am the ambassador as a special envoy since January this year. But of course, the efforts of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to better cooperate with international organizations in this sphere in particular does not limit with this council. I will start with the wider scope, and then I will drive it to more narrow to our council. So right after the start of large-scale aggression by Russia, not only large-scale, the aggression against Ukraine back in 2014, it's become obvious that Russia is using such an illegal way of waging a weapon of war, the sexual violence. Just a few weeks after large-scale invasion, we started getting messages about facts of sexual violence related to conflict committed by Russian armed forces. And those signals were coming from the territories that were or are still under Russian occupation. That information was mostly corroborated by the UN and OSCE and non-governmental organizations numerous NGOs, because the data about sexual violence were documented by Bureau of Democratic Institutions at the OSCE and the missions of so-called Moscow mechanism at the OSCE, the High Commissioner on Human Rights in the UN, and the Independent International Commission on investigating these crimes in Ukraine. The human rights organizations and the media started to speak about sexual crimes committed by Russian military starting from June 2022, especially after the Russian units retreated from Kyiv and Chernihiv regions, which they earlier occupied. And then later, as they were pushed from Kharkiv and Kherson regions. A number of witnesses interviewed by OSCE, the Bureau, so contained facts, attempts and successful sexual acts, coercive disrobing, threats from the Russian military. In 2023, the monitoring mission of UN on human rights reported 138 sexual acts committed by Russian military against Ukrainian civilians. 274 total cases were confirmed. And these are not the latest data from the monitoring mission. And it's just a tip of an iceberg. Because at this stage, it's not possible to really assess the scale of CRSV because of the still ongoing warfare, because of the mass relocation of people. Many such crimes, many such crimes remain unseen and unregistered. The survivors often cannot or would not report on that because of the fear of stigmatization and safety risks if they live in temporarily occupied territories. Of course, cooperation with the OSCE and the general prosecution is a serious help. The general prosecution takes part in meetings with OSCE. Like last year, there was a meeting dedicated to countering sexual violence as a weapon of war, where the representatives of the general prosecution provided the relevant current information about the efforts and also about the international standards, which is survivor-centered approach. And the work is ongoing with the ministries. I was listening to the previous presentations and we've heard it. The Bureau on Democratic Institutions and Human Rights of OSCE continues to publish their reports. The cycle is mostly twice or three times per year from June to December. And those reports contain the necessary information. Usually the data is collected through interviews. And also the Bureau doesn't only focus in these interviews on people who already have provided such interview. They're trying to locate and interview people who've never spoken about it. And of course, I once again want to thank Madam Kateryna Levchenko for your multiple assistance in different formats of OSCE activity and for communicating the voice of Ukrainian government and delivering Ukrainian position to member countries, 56 member countries. Ukraine has actively collaborated with the representative general secretary of the UN on issues of sexual violence related to war. The practical steps included practical assistance to survivors. In 2022, the Ukrainian government signed cooperation on agreement on battling the CRSV, and we also heard a great presentation just recently. And I just want to stress how important it is to create the register of damages. And it is really a unique thing. And I hope that it will produce more effective tools. The national plan of Ukraine to enforce the resolution 1325 also was updated to battle new challenges, new threats, including CRSV and in particular Russian aggression. So now the issue how to respond to such challenges, assessment of humanitarian needs, medical, social assistance, expanding and empowering women from temporarily occupied territories. We continue cooperating with international commission, UN Commission on investigating Russian crimes in Ukraine. Just the next committee report is expected to mid-March, this month. There is no data yet, but it's understandable that committee has established. Unfortunately, the SRSV cases still continue to happen, but we still anticipate the final information from in this report. So to sum it up, how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs cooperates with international organizations, this whole cooperation can be split into several pillars, if you want. The first pillar is data collection, establishing the facts. That's where international organizations are of tremendous help to Ukraine. Pillar 2 is communicating this information to witness bodies, international organizations, partner organizations, NGOs, to contributors and donors. And I think without international cooperation in this area, in this pillar, it wouldn't have been as effective at all. Then registration of violations to the register, as we do with Register of Damages of Council of Europe. Of course, it has all led to expanding and strengthening our cooperation, improvement, certain specialization of this work and these recent updates, possible further institutionalization of this cooperation. And it's a constant work. As a consequence of this development, if we look into the future, and the new structures and new agencies are being created, but we hope that in the future there will be additional agencies created, such as the tribunal. However, it's going to be called in the future, but in any way, it's a body that will directly deal with the issue of accountability. Justice and compensation. And actually responding and dealing with this horrendous acts of aggression. It's a long way ahead, but I sincerely hope that it leads us to effective remedy. And the newly created council at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is part of this work. We don't limit ourselves just to one structure, doing some limited work. We're trying to act as a contact body, as a window in this regard, and tackle as wide as we can scope of aspects. It's a new experience for the ministry, but I believe it has already shown the effects, the positive effects. And for me personally, the primary task I see for us is establishing contacts with the network of similar functioning structures, ambassadors to this cause that exists in other countries. And I think that development of international cooperation in this additional line of work will bring additional fruits and results for Ukraine in particular, and for dealing with this huge challenge for entire humanity. Thank you. Thank you so much, Eugene, for your statement and for taking the leadership role and coordinating this newly created body that indeed has all the chances to become a unique platform for bringing together international experience and to popularize and to share Ukrainian experience in battling this negative phenomenon. So let's proceed to Natalia, who represents one of the most powerful umbrella NGO that fights for strengthening of women's rights, empowering women. I know that you keep advocating women's rights on the international arena, and your representatives, your colleagues also are the voices of Ukrainian women on the international scene. And my question is following. What else can our international partners and the donors can do to make the number of cases not grow but dwindle, and to make the response to CRSV, the response more coordinated, more organized, and more effective? So what else can they do? Second question, how do you see the role of civil society organizations in raising awareness about this globally? Thank you. Thank you, Eugene. Jevgenia, and I hope that most of you will agree with me, dear participants in this discussion, that each of us here in Ukraine have a front line to fight. And some people fight in the trenches, some people fight international advocating for our cause, but we also have, all of us have personal front line. We try and conquer our fears, we try and overstep our fears, our pain, of course it's important to support the army, but it's no less important to support those who fight on that personal front. And you can only imagine how it looks like, that personal front line of those who survived the CRSV, those who survived the torture, the denigration, and captivity. We've talked today about the voices of the survivors, how to empower those voices even more, how to make those voices audible for the decision makers, especially for international decision makers. And I thought about some, if not recipes, then maybe advice for our international partners, what should be accounted for, what should be done in order to strengthen those voices. First of all, supporting the organizations that survivors unite into. And that's my main message for our international partner. Such organizations like SEMA Ukraine, like Ludmila mentioned, and Irina Dovgan also mentioned it. I am proud, and my colleagues in Ukrainian Women's Fund are also proud to be the donor who supports SEMA Ukraine, who provides grants and institutional support for 2 years now. We help SEMI to have an administrative budget, to hire staff, and to become more stronger, to become stronger as an organization. We're not alone in that. They are supported by Global Survivors Fund, McQuagga Foundation, but the survivor organizations have to have more donors. This funding has to be flexible, long-standing, and not too bureaucratic. This is very, very important. It's also important to strengthen the voices of SRVC survivors from the women's movement. And we have today above 100 Ukrainian women organizations and feminist organizations from different countries, from different corners of Ukraine. I want to thank you so much for coming over here. You are adding your voices to the voices of those men and women who survived the SRCV, and it's an important message for the donors. It's so important to support those organizations, their initiatives, to improve their capacity to help the survivors, to support networks and coalitions that have been shaped in this. There are 19 of such coalitions. They're all regional. That's a regional coalition, 1325. There are about 600 members of these organizations. They're from NGOs, from the authorities, from security and defense sector. And I think these 600 voices will join the united voice that fights for the survivors' rights. Olena Zelenska today earlier, she quoted the words of one of the survivors that all the people who lived through torture, denigration, they live through the same scope of challenges: economic, social, psychological. They need resources. Of course, reparations are extremely important, but not only that. To add to reparations, we need economic support programs so that the survivors could effectively adapt and continue to lead a dignified life. When we were designing this program for both economic and other types of support, it's very important to have targeted, individualized approach. You know, we used to say about the medical reform that the money should follow the patient. And these programs have to be shaped based on the actual needs analysis. They're not rigid, but they're flexible to be adaptable based on the needs assessment. So the process of measuring the needs, of assessing the needs, has to be streamlined. Of course, we need more people in the wider society to know and to be aware of such phenomenon through art, through creativity, through the media. And so the theater play Numa Sestre, which we had a glimpse of today in the morning, I think this stage, this theater play has to be more visible, has to be more promoted in Ukraine as well as other countries. Olena Kondratyuk, in the first part of our event, quoted the words of one member of SEMA, who said this is her first time sitting in the first row. I even noted this for myself. It's important to have this first time. It's important that we set an example through this conference, how it should be. And I would also encourage our international partners to use our example, because, of course, the survivors have to be in the front row. They have to be together with those who make decisions, not only in Ukraine, but on international platforms. Other than being in the front row, they also have to stand and speak on the podiums. They also have to be wherever political decisions are made about them.
In order to do this, we need still to do a lot. We need these podiums to be comfortable for survivors. We need education, we need advocacy skills, we need English, we need travel grants in order for them to be able to come to international platform and deliver a speech. And that is also my message to international organizations. Well, and at the end, you know, CRSV, it's not only about survivors and systems. That is, just like our colleagues mentioned, it's about the agenda, women, peace, security, National Plan 1325. It's about like fair restoration. So the voices of survivors have to be included to the plans of recovery of Ukraine. And as for your second question, Ms. Yevgenia, very briefly, what NGOs are doing, in a week, we are going to talk about CRSV from a really powerful UN platform. And we have the events planned where I hope Ms. Lyudmila will also participate. We will talk about situation in Ukraine from the UN stage. And I think that's my final message for all of us, for international organizations, for Ukrainian organizations. We are doing a lot, but let us do more. And I am sure that we can do more. Let us look for some approaches in order to change policies in Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine, but also abroad, so that international system of justice can work as soon as possible for survivors in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Natalia, for your motivating, inspiring speech. That is incredibly powerful voice of Ukrainian women. And on this positive note, I would like to give the floor to our audience so that our dear listeners, using the opportunity that we have incredibly powerful panel and representatives of international organizations, representatives of the state. You can use this opportunity, you can ask questions. Maybe you are too shy to ask them, but now it's your opportunity to ask the questions. Sure? Yep. Hello, one more time to everyone. My name is Olena Sama, Ukraine. My question is to Ms. Victoria Litvinova. In 2021, some women from Sama provided evidence to Prosecution General regarding CRSV. My question is, these 274 cases that are documented, do you have other evidence there, or you didn't include that? If not, then why? Yeah, you can hear me. So, of course, in order to give a clear answer, yes, I need to open the materials of criminal investigation, but I see no reasons why they could have been not included. I'm sorry, I don't know whether you were here for the whole day, but maybe you heard about our new initiative, Coordination Center for Working with Survivors and Witnesses. That is why we actually created that, so that survivors from any military crimes have constant feedback and updated information about what is happening in our investigations. And they can get, through a coordinator at any moment, information. What is with their materials? Was it taken into account during pre-court investigation? Yes, I do know, because we had few meetings with survivors of military crimes, not only CRSV, that there is enough number of claims that some investigative actions were not done on time, and they were necessary, and the necessity of doing that was due to the first evidence, first statements that we received. And yes, we understand that people were hoping that quickly we will question other persons, or we will conduct investigative actions. I'm not making excuses. However, I'm asking you for understanding, because now we have more than 100,000 military crimes registered. All of them are being investigated, and our legal system has never faced such a workload before. So I am sure that there are some separate, not quick processes, but we are also one of not many countries that is conducting investigation of military crimes during the martial law. And we are introducing a lot of initiatives not to lose any evidence. And now we are just focusing our prosecutors that evidence from witnesses and survivors should be conducted just one time, but qualitatively and holistically using videos. So not to re-traumatize the victims with like asking them new questions again and again, not to return the person to the past, as a matter of fact. I will check this information personally. I can promise that. However, well, actually, so that the evidence disappears, that is almost impossible. So I can tell you that they will be taken into account. Thank you very much, Ms. Elena. Thank you, Ms. Victoria. Do we have some more questions from the audience? Yeah, I see there are no questions. So, Ms. Kateryna, final word. Yeah. Not the last word, you know, I will have some more. I will come back to the session. I will come back to speeches of our dear speakers. I would like to thank you for your kind participation in this session and in this discussion, for work of each person, because you're representing different organizations and structures. However, you are combining your efforts, possibilities of your organizations in order to achieve justice for survivors. And huge thank you to you for that. Let us give a round of applause to speakers. And I would like to mention that one of the forms of reparations is recognition of survivors. And it's very important for us that this recognition is informal, that it is constant, and we remember about that every day in our work when we are working on this topic. And I think that both for survivors and for some organizations and for your partners, that would be incredibly important to think about that kind of artistic opportunity that will give example of recognizing everybody who survived violence, but they were not conquered by enemy. And I think that here Ukraine can demonstrate a positive example. And I wish you inspiration, dear colleagues, your friends. You have a really wide range of those who are supporting you. I believe in your powers, that you will be able to move in this direction further on. Thank you one more time for participation in this session. I give the floor to moderator, Ms. Lyudmila. Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers, personally, Ms. Natalia. Thank you for the support that we have